Geek Therapy Radio.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2 3.
Are you recording a show?
Oh yeah.
Babe, are you going to be done by 7:30?
I'm gonna be done by 6:30, hopefully.
Okay.
They're about 6:45 is the latest. What do you mean by the mug is working?
I told you it may be my inspiration.
Will you describe
No,
what the mug looks like?
not with a microphone in front of my face.
Okay, well then I will. The mug
Babe.
is called Poopy Mug, and it's shaped like a turd. It's a turd emoji, is what it is. And it's shaped like a turd.
You need to give this information out.
And you drink coffee out of it, and it's supposed to inspire you even more so than the coffee does to make your own emoji.
It's ice cream, babe. It's not poop.
That's what my mom thought it was. She thought it was an ice cream emoji. Oh no, mama. Oh no, it's a poop. She goes, oh well, that's just terrible.
That's
Anyway.
what I told you I thought it was when we first started dating, and then you gave me that pillow. We hadn't even been on our first date yet, mind you. And you gave me that pillow,
Yeah.
and that was the inside joke.
Well, that sealed the deal. So the moral of the story is, fellas, if you like a girl, go to Hobby Lobby or Michael's or something or Amazon and order a poopy pillow emoji throw cushion thing. Give it to her before the first date.
'Cause that's not creepy.
Because it's not creepy at all. And a year or two down the line, you know what? You'll be proposing and then eating lobster bisque in minutes.
It was definitely a couple years.
That's probably...
Because then we dated, and then we were engaged, and...
Yeah, and now it's a funny story that I gave you poopy pillow, and that's where it all
started
going
with
well.
poop.
It all started. Poops are the great uniter. Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. My wife, the mental missus. What was your
I don't remember.
moniker? I have to go back into the archives and figure out what her name is. She's on the show rarely, but she is here at the radio station with me, and I need to bang out a podcast. I was debating whether I could do another podcast tonight, but I thought I need to, because there is something that I actually do want to talk about besides poopy mugs and poopy pillows. That is that today is the launch day for the RTX 3090. Yes, we're going to talk about some actual geek news here. So the RTX 3080 came out a few days ago. Now the 3090 is available, and for those of you who listen to every podcast, you have heard me jonesing to see the RTX 3090 benchmarks. Well, the embargo is lifted, and all sorts of YouTube channels and tech articles and websites are releasing the benchmarks for the RTX 3090. And quite frankly, and I need to frame this up as best I can here, I'm kind of disappointed. I hyped myself up. That is not to say that the 3090 is a bad graphics card. It is absolutely positively not a bad graphics card. For some more perspective, the outgoing RTX Titan, what does that cost? Like $2,500. The 3090, of course, destroys the outgoing RTX Titan for $1,000 less. So in that regard, it's a massive step forward. So if you are... This is where we get to the nuts and bolts of it. If you are a CAD designer or a 3D modeler, or you need this card in some sort of workstation, hardcore setup, production setup, 3090 absolutely is a beast. It's $1,000 cheaper than the outgoing model, and it has all the more performance. Actually, let me see what the performance gains are over the RTX Titan real quick. So I'm looking at Tom's Hardware, and I would say a conservative a conservative, it's not even a guess, a conservative benchmark is that the 3090 is at least 50% faster than the Titan RTX or RTX Titan in most games. Why you'd be using a Titan RTX just for gaming? Well, the Titan series has always kind of been this stopgap between a gamer card and the Quadro Professional series card. They cost way less than the Quadro series. Quadro is almost exclusively dedicated to content creation and production and 3D and CAD work, whereas the RTX and the Titan series is kind of between the gamer class, so like the 3080, the 3080 is where the Titan's usually sat. Well, we don't have a Titan right now. Will we get an RTX Titan soon? Maybe we'll see. We'll probably get 3090 Ti's, 3080 Ti's. Undoubtedly, we'll get those in the near future. But effectively, the 3090 replaces the Titan. And in most titles, it is about 50% and sometimes more so faster than the outgoing Titan RTX for $1,000 less, or at the very least cheaper. There's a lot of scalping going on. There's a lot of riffraff in the community right now and in the consumer space for these cards. But the bottom line is that they are cheaper MSRP than the outgoing Titan series, and they perform conservatively 50% better in games, and all the more better in content creation applications. So your Blender renders, your CAD renders, all sorts of applications like that. It is markedly better. It is a generational leap as we anticipated. But let's focus more towards the current offerings. So let's focus on the 3080 versus the 3090. For the past few podcasts and radio shows, I've been jonesing. I can't wait to see the 3090. I even went as far as to say I would probably hold out and save up for and buy a 3090 because it is for me, it's a graphics card that will last at least 5 to 7 years for me. I'm still running my GTX 980 from 2015. I don't buy graphics cards that often because when I do buy them, I make sure that they are pretty much, can I say cock of the walk? Is that okay to say? I think it's okay. I turned my wife's mic off, so of course it's okay to say. I buy the flagships, usually, the gaming flagships, not the content creation flagships, not the Titans, but GTX 980 was flagship when it came out, and I bought it, and it lasts me, 5 to 7 years or so. So I was saying that I was going to wait for the 3090 and get that because it was going to last me another 5 to 7 years. But comparing it to the 3080, which costs 100% less than the 3090. The 3080 is oh my gosh, $799, $699. Let me MSRP. Scalpers is something else. RTX 3080 cost. Sorry for Googling this on the fly because I forget what the actual MSRP is. MSRP $699, $700, and the 3090 MSRP is $1,500. So it's almost $800 more expensive. So, okay, not 100% more expensive. It's $800 more expensive MSRP than the 3080. But the gains you get for that $800, do you think it's in any way, shape, or form comparable or justifiable for that price if you are just a gamer? I need to specify that again. If you are just thinking about buying an RTX 3090 just for playing games at 4K or 8K or whatever you want, do you think the $800 nets, 50% better performance? No. On the whole, in games, the 3090 only gets you about 8 to 12, I would say, 8 to 12, around 10 frames average, more frames per second than the 3080. For the extra $800. That is such a diminishing return for the money. So far as to say that, of course, without even having to say so, I no longer have any desire. Well, I got the desire. I have no longer any intention of ever getting a 3090 unless someone handed me a 3090. If I had to spend my own money on a graphics card, absolutely positively would be the RTX 3080. And possibly by the time I'm actually able to make a decision like this, maybe a 3080 Ti will be out in the wild. But the 3090, $800 for an extra 10 frames? Nope. That is not worth it. And I would urge you can spend your money however you want to spend your money, but for 99.9% of gamers, it makes no sense at all to buy an RTX 3090 for $800 more just to get those 10 extra frames. That being said, I need to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. 10 extra frames, if you are playing in native 8K or even native 4K, 10 frames is the difference between 50 frames per second and 60 frames per second. It's the difference between 55 frames per second and 65 frames per second. And why is that important? Because I would say right now, the ideal goal benchmark for 4K gaming and 8K gaming is a buttery smooth 60 frames per second. The 3090, in some cases, will put you at that 60 frames per second. But my argument is, oh man, with VSync and all this, the frame smoothing and everything that's available now and how good it is now, a smooth, tear-free 55 frames per second looks, to the naked eye, to most people just as good as a smooth, tear-free 65 frames per second. And I know we can argue that back and forth all day long. You say, Johnny, you're just being a pleb. You don't understand PC Master Race. We need to see that actual 60 frames per second buttery smooth performance there. Well, I would still wager most gamers in a sightseeing game, if you're cranking up all those settings to get that beautiful, gorgeous 4K or even up to 8K, between 55 and 60 frames per second near as makes no difference if the screen isn't tearing and it's all being buttery smooth. But again, that is just a decision that you, the consumer, are going to have to make for yourself. Are those 10 extra frames worth an $800 premium versus a 3080? And I would argue that for 99.9% of gamers, it's not justifiable. It is certainly not justifiable to me. So we'll leave it at this. If the bulk of what you're going to be doing is gaming and then some content creation, which is the category I fall into when I edit videos and do this or that, which requires the GPU to perform actual work, the 3080 is going to curb stomp my GTX 980. It's going to be an almost unethical boost in performance and rendering times. It's going to be crazy. Is the 3090, in its extra few seconds to render out a scene in Sony Vegas, is that worth $800? To me, no. Not to me, and I don't believe not to most gamers. But if you're a content creator, you make your living creating content, sure, go for the 3090 when you need to meet deadlines. So in some rendering tests, I was watching Jay's 2 cents earlier, and this is for a little bit better perspective. In a lot of Blender tests and such, which, by the way, Blender is supposed to emulate the kind of rendering that Disney would do in a CGI or an animated film, where each frame of the film can take several seconds to render, if not minutes to render, depending on your hardware. The RTX 3090 can churn out renders in Blender in various tests in around 10 seconds or so, 9 seconds or so, like the BMW Blender, around 9 or 10 seconds. You might think, well, 9 or 10 seconds to render one image. No, that's one frame. And Jay did a very good job of explaining this. That's one frame of an entire hour-and-a-half long movie. So when you're talking about 9 seconds per frame to render out of tens of thousands of frames, you're talking hours, days, weeks, months. The last Lego movie film took a year to render. It took a year to render in those rendering farms, let alone just one PC with one RTX 3090 or what have you. It took an entire year to render in a rendering farm. So that 9 seconds to render one frame in a Blender test, 9 seconds times 10,000 frames equals a very, very, very long time. And when you're trying to meet deadlines, I'm making the case for content creators. When you're trying to meet deadlines, every second per frame counts. It adds up to hours, if not days, on the other end. So in that use case scenario, an RTX 3090 would make all the sense in the world. It's a $1,500 one-time investment towards keeping your clients happier and keeping clients and even gaining more clients. It's an investment in the business. That makes all the sense in the world. Now, go to your consumer who's an accountant or who's a school teacher or who's a mechanic or whatever your day job is. 3090 makes no sense if all you're doing is coming home and playing Forza, or you're coming home to play Flight Simulator 2020 like I do. 3090 makes no sense in that application because it's not an investment at that point. It's purely a consumable thing to make your life, to make gaming better for you, to be prettier, look better, more frames. And if all you're after is more frames, then the 3080 gets you literally 90% there to a 3090 for $800 cheaper. So if you're a gamer, my advice, go for the 3080. There's not enough benefit to the 3090. If you're a content creator and your job depends on it and your livelihood depends on it, or you're just the type of gamer who needs the best of the best of the best and has the Skrilla to spend on it, sure, go for a 3090. No one can stop you. Let me borrow it. Let me benchmark it. So anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about with the 3080 to the 3090. My money, when possible, will go towards the 3080. It is a ridiculous waste in my use case scenario going 3090. But that's just me. You do what you want. Let's move on. Maybe one extra story. I'm going to turn on my wife's microphone and see what we can dig up here.
Great.
Hey, babe.
Hey.
I saw you drawing the other day for class. Was drawing ever a geek thing of yours? Did you ever draw a lot as a kid or as a teenager?
I had a phase. Yeah. I would look at something and then try to draw it. Like I'm
From
not
memory?
very good at I'm not very good at creating out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm better at creating or recreating and adding my own spin to it, I guess.
Like I would do with Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sure. Yeah. So it wasn't something I did all the time, but it was just another outlet for relaxing and
Just creative.
creativity.
Just get that creative itch. What do you think you drew the most? Was there anything that you were particularly drawn to other than like boys' butts and stuff?
Horses. I like to draw horses. Not boys' butts.
Like Tina
Yeah.
in Bob's Burgers.
Yeah. And they probably looked a lot like Tina's horse drawings.
I saw what you drew. It was very nice.
But that
What did you draw? What was it?
It was a
Oh, it was a
Snake
snake biting a
being
heel.
stepped on. My inspiration behind that was in Mulan, not the newest one, but the cartoon.
Yeah, the animated one.
Yeah. When Mushu gets stepped on by the horse, and his eyes go bug out and everything.
Oh my
I wanted to
gosh.
be able to recreate that because that was the humor that I got from the reading that I was drawing from, but it didn't come across that way.
Well, did you get graded on it yet?
Yeah.
Not that grades matter for art, unless you're in art school, but
And the professor said that, like, this is just a for fun.
did he say it just to you?
No.
Okay.
He said to there were people who use stick figures, and so it's not an art class.
Yeah.
So he understood that, but I got an A.
Awesome. Based on recent activity in your gut, what do you not the poopy
Right.
coffee stuff, the baby stuff. What do you think that our child, what do you think that my son is going to be into based on recent events?
Based on recent events?
Just based on how he's been acting in the gut recently.
Well,
in the
it's
womb.
hard to tell because he's reacting based off of what I'm ingesting, what I'm eating. I'd like to think that he's reacting to what he hears, but it's hard to tell. I think because of both of his parents, he will not choose one thing. He will be into lots of different things.
I'd hope so.
My nephew is into farming and has always been into trucks.
Always, he's like, how's Lee?
He's 4.
Yeah.
But ever since, before he could even talk, he would point out to trucks.
Like farm equipment and like tractors and bulldozers and
he
stuff.
He can tell you every type of truck there is. And that's his fascination. And so he may continue in that direction and become a construction worker or be a farmer. He seems to be really into that right now. But I think with our little one, there's just going to be so many different things we expose him to. But it's hard to know. What do you think?
Well, I think he's going to be into karate.
Well, okay, yeah.
Or soccer.
Fair.
Or something where he just punches it. Maybe his whole thing...
Street fighter in my belly.
Maybe his whole thing is he's just going to be just punching and kicking all the time. Not punching and kicking people, but just like... Hiya! Hey! Kick! Doink! Just nothing. Just punching pillows and stuff. And that would be fine with me. My excuse is that if he shows a penchant for the martial arts, that I'll pick right back up, with my yellow belt in Taekwondo.
Yeah,
and we'll go to do a class
together.
together.
Every kid wants is for their dad to join them.
I just want everyone to picture that karate or Taekwondo class. It's just a bunch of 7-year-olds than a 45-year-old man. Yes, sensei. And bowing and taking off his shoes. Yes, sensei. Kick, kick. And then even better...
Throwing his back out in the middle of a kick.
Okay. Just even better picturing... Like, you have to pair up to spar, and I won't be allowed to spar against my own son. So I'll have to spar against, like, a 6-year-old girl or something.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
For you, I think that's going to be the hardest thing for you is probably, still being who you are, which is childlike in nature.
Okay.
Playful is a better word.
Thank you.
But trying to also be dad, and we're going to be friends, but we're also going to be parents.
Babe.
So there's going to be a separation thing.
Do you think that I'm going to have a problem punishing my son?
No.
It's a bridge we'll have to cross, I know, but...
Right. I'm thinking more of like, you're going to want to do things with him that he's going to be like, ugh, Dad.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true for every parent and child. But who knows? I mean, who knows? The way I've looked at it, and I've told you this, and I'll tell listeners this, is that I'm curious to see what he's going to be into from any age, even when he's 1 and 2, 3, 4, it becomes a teenager and a preteen teenager, all that stuff. I'm going to be fascinated to see what he's into because it's going to give me an excuse to kind of get into the same thing.
Right.
Like buying tools and things like that. If he turns out to be just like ridiculously into cars or something like that, and that gives me an excuse to get an old Beetle and fix it up with him. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking forward to. But he might not be into that at all. He might not. We might try him out in baseball and soccer and sports, and he might not have any draw to it. Or he might love baseball or football or a team sport more than anything else in the world, and it might be hard to get him to concentrate on schoolwork. Please. One of the things I'm going to do, not to get too sidetracked here, one of the things I hope to do is be not extremely, but be very encouraging towards math, and be very encouraging that he become properly educated in math. Partly because I will be retaking math along with him, but just if there was one area of my life that if I could go back and tell myself, sit myself down in like second grade or third grade, fourth grade, whatever, whenever long division was, and just say, Johnny, this is you from the future. Don't be shocked. Don't cry. But I'm you from the future. I need you to pay more attention to math here. This is going to serve you so much better in life than almost anything else. If I know you want to goof around and be a cut up and be a jackass, but just do me one favor, like just pay 10% more attention in math class, because I want you to graduate with a very solid foundation in math. It would be great. I'm talking to myself now in the past. It would be great if you could graduate high school already having calculus done and the higher level of math. I think a lot of my geekery would have been so much better served. Not that I can't go back and relearn the math, but it would be so much better served if I had a strong, universal language foundation in math. So if my son now is showing a penchant towards geekery and science, I would implore him or be very encouraging. All right, if you want to build robots and program and do all these things, knowing math, knowing advanced mathematics is going to serve you so much, serve your geek things so much better than just kind of hashing your way through it with a calculator every time you want to try to build a basic circuit or work on a car or something like that.
Well,
so I would encourage the math.
All of my friends who have children that are currently in math, they have all said that they don't understand it. Mm-hmm. It's not the same as how they learned it. Mm-hmm. That they're having to do lots of different ways to get to the answer instead of just one way. So we're not going to be alone in kind of needing tutoring as we try to teach our child. We're going to get a lot out of what he's educated on.
Yeah, and I'm going to be... I say that right now, and there's maybe parents listening that are just like, oh boy, Johnny, you have no idea what you're wishing for. But I can't help but think that I'm going to be excited and curious about what he's learning about. Not that I would say, what are you teaching him, and go march into the school and be like, what are you filling his head with? But the books have more stuff in them now since I was last in high school. And it's going to be interesting to learn. There have been more scientific discoveries. There's science that I learned in middle school and high school that we've learned more since then. The theories have changed a little bit. The data's changed a lot of it. So it's going to be a lot of fun, I'm saying this now, to kind of go over his homework with him and see what he's learning. That would be fascinating to me. What's going to be also weird, and I think I'll wrap up with this final thought, is that when I was growing up, back in my day...
It was so long ago.
That's enough out of the peanut gallery. We had computer lab, and I'm sure there's still computer classes at school, but I guarantee...
school is computer.
I know right now it's online. I understand that. But if there are computer classes now, in high school, my computer classes were... so the late 90s, it was how to use Microsoft Office and Excel and Word and all this stuff to help you with your job in the future and making spreadsheets and things like that. I would imagine that in modern school, and I don't know because I'm not in modern school, but I'm going to learn through my son, mm-hmm. that you're going to cover Microsoft Office day one, because most students are already going to know how to friggin' use a word processor. They'll be typing out 1,000 words per minute already. It's not going to be teaching people how to interface with a computer. That's going to be day one, the first couple days of computer class. I would imagine it's much more programming oriented now. It's way more advanced.
I don't know.
Advanced to me, basic to them, but advanced to me. Growing up, going in an elementary school and fighting over who gets to use the Apple II C with the color monitor, play Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and the Apple IIc, playing number munchers on the color screen, popping in clip art to the word processor, playing Oregon Trail in color, or happily playing it just in green, black and green, just fine. But those were the computers that we had computer lab with, and it was basically just to get students, young people, familiar with computers. It wasn't to teach you any sort of advanced functions of computers. It was just that, hey, it's 1991. Not every single one of you, even in an affluent community, are going to have a family computer. This may be your only exposure to a personal computer. So going to go over the basics here while we're in school. I'm curious to see what computer classes are for even elementary school kids now, because obviously, yes, they're going to be familiar with computers and tablets. They're going to use them every day. They're going to use them for their schoolwork.
Right. They're not using Word or even the email system. They're using stuff like Canvas, which is a place where they can see the assignments and submit the assignments through that, instead of having to email the teachers directly, type it up on a separate Word document. They can submit it directly through Canvas.
Right.
So they need to learn how to use that.
Yeah. So I think that's right. I think it's going to be more focused type of computer classes, focusing on single bits of software and programs, rather than we learned how to turn on the computer. Like, we spent time as children. Where do you go on the actual case to turn the computer on? What's the, oh my gosh, the sequence in protocol to turning on the computer? When do you turn on the monitor? When do you turn on the actual CPU itself? What setting do you have to put the monitor and disk drive? Two separate things. What disk drive do you want to use? They're all labeled big floppy 5 1/4 inch disk. How do you hold a floppy disk? They'll never have to learn that. Never, ever.
Nope.
Will they have to see the save icon in real life, or ever deal with it, or ever deal with corrupted data and bad sectors and formatting? They'll never. How do you format a disk? What's the command? What are some basic commands to do things that you want to do in basic programming language? How do you load programs using an Apple II? Oh, it was really easy in Apple II. You put in the Oregon Trail disk and then you turn it on. Can you just put in the disk and then close it and then Oregon Trail just works? No. Shut down the computer. There's things you have to do. The easiest way to get the software to work, you have to put the disk in the drive, and the computer's going to look to the drive and it's going to boot the software from the disk. Oh, you mean you doesn't just boot into Windows or Mac OS and you just go from there? No. Back in the day, it was learning all of that. And
sitting and waiting for it to load. The kids don't have to sit and wait.
Lord.
Just for the computer to turn on.
Yeah.
Or to shut down. It's a different world, babe.
We also learn, and maybe they'll go over this in school a bit, one of the most fascinating days was when we had an example Apple II that we could dissect and basically pull the cover off of, and the teacher would point out all the different components on the motherboard and the motherboard itself. Students, this is called a motherboard. This is where the CPU goes. It is 8 megahertz or whatever it is, 4.6 different models of computers were fast. 8 megahertz? What? My computer is 1 megahertz. We barely even knew what a megahertz was. But pointing out all the components on the board, and that obviously tweaked my geek brain the most, is seeing all the circuits and all the capacitors and all the resistors and stuff inside there. This is a daughter board. This is what handles extra video capability, or this is the hard disk controller card. Wow, that was more fascinating to me than what the stuff actually did. The first computer we got in our house was a Packard Bell, and I think it was a 486 with MMX. Was it MMX technology? I think so. It was a 486, and it could play video. And I remember knowing that computers could play video because I had played the Weezer music video off the Windows 95 CD so many times. I knew that it could play video, and it even had a video on the CD of Bill Gates saying, "This is what 15 frames per second looks like. You can still read my lips legibly." It was like, the resolution was like 90 by 20. It was terrible resolution, but I knew that the computer was capable of playing video, and I knew that my dad had this camcorder, and you could plug in an RCA cable to the camcorder, and I looked at the back of the computer. The back of the computer looked like it has RCA slots, so I just remember plugging the camera's video output to every one of the connectors on the back of the computer and just waiting for the screen to display video. I thought that'd be the coolest thing in the world. It didn't. That's not the way it worked. Until we got a TV tuner card, and the TV tuner card had the coax input, and it also had a composite video input. And I think that was, at that time, we had a Pentium computer, and that blew my mind. Being able to digitize, record something on the high 8 video camera, and then press play on the camera and record in the computer and record the video file and figure out how to save the video file at various settings to make it fit onto a floppy disk. Those are the glory days.
But, okay.
It was so fun.
So just to kind of circle back to what we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
Would it have been as fun if you had your dad sitting over your shoulder trying to show you, even though it's cool stuff, trying to show you all these things? Or was it the discovery of it that was exciting for you?
Well, not my dad.
Right, but
So
you get the idea.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'll try to be respectful, and because I was a kid myself and a teenager and all that myself, to know the limits of where I wanted parents, how much guidance I wanted in my life. And would it have made it boring and not as cool if my dad was a computer programmer and knew all about computers and was kind of showing me. I kind of think, though, that it would have been great. I think saying that now, for me personally, I can't speak for my son, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think for me personally, if my dad was a computer whiz and was showing me how to work that stuff at that young age, I think it would have been mesmerizing. I think it would have been amazing. Let me tell you the experience that I had with my dad and my computer. The only time my dad was over my shoulder or near me around the computer was, I vividly remember one time we had a CD-ROM drive, and it was the type of CD-ROM drive that you had to load the CD into a cartridge, into a jewel case, close it, and then you load that whole cartridge into the CD-ROM drive. It was a 1X CD-ROM drive. So I was little and had no concept. I just knew CDs go in that slot. So I didn't put the CD into that cartridge. I just pushed the CD into that open slot, and obviously it wasn't working. And I called my dad, "Dad, can you help with the computer?" My dad had no friggin' idea how to do any of this stuff. But he did see that the CD was jammed into the slot. And what did he say? It was something like, he just leans his... Can I repeat this? I'll repeat. This is kind of verbatim what he said. "Oh my God, $4,000 down the tube." And he was almost crying.
Oh, no.
And there's F words and S bombs, and he got the barbecue tongs out, and he was, because it had like rubber at the end, and he was fishing it down, and then it pulled the CD out. And luckily the CD worked just fine, but he didn't know that you could pull the CD out relatively easily. He just thought one of his kids had ruined this thing, and that number, it was like $4,000. It was between $2,000 and $4,000, and I was 8 or 9 years old. I had no concept. My allowance at the time was $1 per week. So my heart came out my butthole when I heard him say $4,000, because to me that was 4,000 weeks worth of work. I'm doing the numbers in my head. I was like, my dad's been working since he was 20 years old to afford this computer, and I just broke it because I had no concept of how much or how little $4,000 was. $4,000, let me tell you, in 1992 was new car money. Cheap new car money, but it was new car money. That's how much computers cost. And the fear of God. He didn't yell at me. That was the thing that almost made it even more scary, is that his anger and his rage had bypassed any other human being on earth, including his own son in the room, and was singularly focused on that thousands of dollars had just been flushed down the toilet. Like, he was beyond yelling at me. It was like pain. And it was like suffering. He didn't yell at me. I don't recall him yelling at me for that, because that's not something that, I didn't know what I was doing. It was not like I did something intentional. So he didn't yell at me for that. If I had done it intentionally and I was purposefully trying to break something, I would have got the wrath of God. But that's not the way it went down. So my dad was just in that regard. He didn't yell at me for 2 hours straight. like you normally do. Because it was an accident. But here's the thing, and I said I was going to wrap up like
A long
10
time
minutes ago. My dad was a gamer. He was a gamer in a time when I guess at the time he was in his mid to late 40s, a 45-year-old gamer in 1992, you would be considered like a dweeb outcast of society. If you were 45 and still gaming, a lot of people would assume you lived in the basement with your mom or something. No, my dad had a job and he had 5 children and he liked to play video games. I've said this a couple times, in the past on here, that one of the rules in getting a new video game system was that usually it was that we had to come up with half of the money ourselves. Like the kids, we had to work and pool in together. So if, for instance, let's say the Nintendo 64 is the last example I can give of this. It was like $300, $299 or something. And my dad had been seeing the games in the commercials and things, and he thought it was interesting, but he sure as heck wasn't just going to buy it for us. So he said, I'll tell you what, you guys come up with 150 of it, come up with half of it, and find a hockey game for it, then I will chip in the other half. So we found Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey and 64. It was bundled with Mario 64. It was the greatest thing ever. I don't think my dad came with us to buy it. He was at work, but I vividly remember my brother and my mom, and I think Nathan was with us. Nathan, I've had him on the show a few times. Nate, I think he was with us, and we went to Toys R Us and bought the Nintendo 64. And we gave my mom $150, and we bought the Nintendo 64, and I think my dad stopped on his way home or his way to work the next day and got Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey. And he played it all the time because he played hockey on the regular NES. He played hockey on the Super Nintendo. He played hockey on the N64. The PC gaming he would play Nom. He would play Comanche, which was like a helicopter game. So he played games. He used the computer. Hope you can't hear the emergency alarm in the background there. They're doing a test. I think we'll end it there. We talked about a lot, 42 minutes. That's longer than I thought we'd do. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. You, of course, as always, you are worthy of love. Babe, even you. You're worthy of love, and I love you. I love you, the listener, too, but not in the same way I love my wife.
Well, I hope not.
Yeah, I would get a... Anyways, you're worthy of love, and you're worthy of giving love and receiving love, and you're worthy of your own self-confidence. Please be safe. Share your geek thing. Embrace your geek thing. And I'll talk to you next time. Say bye, babe.
Bye, babe.